Hey, what's up? So, I would like to show you some tips and tricks on how to create your own instruments. And I went to a really nice gong meditation some time ago. And I was lucky enough to have my recorder with me. And I always think you should be a little bit, what do you call it? Uh, Cocky. Um, when in good situations to grab nice audio samples. So I just asked the instructor, hey, I have my recorder with me. I work with sound and I love sound. I'm very interested in what you're doing. Can I please record some of your session? And I'll be happy to give you the recording of the session so you can self-evaluate. And then I would like to mess about with the audio and try to create some instruments out of it. And I've created an instrument out of this already. And I did a recording of it and I sent it to the instructor who did the workshop, and she was very happy about the recording I made for her. So it was cool. I gained some awesome new samples from massive singing bowls, and she got to experience her audio in another way. So I have this sample and I've saved it here on the in the browser, and it's under samples. Boom, here, and it's Louise, who was the instructor, and syngeskål in Danish means singing bowl. So try to find a nice piece. I chopped it up already a bit. I want a piece that has some, yeah, a good deal of noise. I like the non-perfect recordings. So the first thing I do is I'm going to drag it over to an audio track. And on the audio track, I can just hear it as is, like this.
Velkommen til jer alle sammen.
That's Louise talking.
Prøvet det før, og der er nogen, der ikke har prøvet det før.
Yes. So let's try to find a nice spot. Okay, I like that. I'm going to turn on warp so that I'm able to loop this. I'm just going to loop this part of it because that's what I want to work with. And since this is a big audio file, I'm also gonna crop it. Don't worry, it's not gonna ruin anything in your original file. It's just gonna create a new file. So what it does now is it makes a new file in the temporary project, because I haven't saved this yet, and it's in the crop, like samples processed crop. So don't worry, it's not changing anything from the original sample, which is still here in all its full length and vibrational glory. Okay, so I can play it back now as any regular audio file. But what I want to do here is I want to be able to play it chromatically on the keyboard. So in order to do that, I need to load it into the sampler, or simpler, but we call the instrument a sampler. And it lets us play audio files at various speeds, whereby it changes the pitch. So having loaded up an empty sampler instrument on an empty MIDI track, because it's an instrument we need to play, I can now drop the cropped sample on top of my sampler. And now I can start playing the audio and pitch it. So I have my MIDI track record armed. Let's just do a little cleanup here. We only need these two tracks. I'm going to stop the original recording. And now, when I press the keyboard, my computer keyboard, I can pitch around on the keyboard. So the first thing I want to do here before we get into tuning the instrument is making my sample a little bit louder. So I want it to be as loud as possible. And I can do that manually by changing the volume. I can just right click and say normalize volumes. And if I wanted the pan to be equal, I could also say normalize pan, and you can see down here that it shifted this recording a little bit to the right, so it's more powerful in the left. All right, now I want to set the start point, and I can zoom in, and then I can get real close to the start point. Excellent. I'm also going to set an end point, and the reason I'm setting the end point is that I want this sample to loop. Already here, I'm messing with it, not just in the timbral way, but like in the sense that I'm able to pitch it, but I am also able to sustain it. And I get a loop brace now, as we know it from the audio clip. Give me this piece, Command L, loop this piece. Start outside of the loop, but go into the loop and re-loop, okay? So it's the same principles we're working with in the sampler. And I'm just gonna try to hear how it sounds like this. So it's a little bit harsh at the end where it's looping, bonk. And there are two things that can happen here. Either it's because I've set my loop point where the waveform is not close to the 0 line. So not close to the 0 line means here. All right, you see here it's crossing the 0 line for the left channel, and here, down here, it's crossing the 0 line for the right channel. It's the same thing I'm looking at here. And what we can do is we can turn on snap, and you saw that this moved just a little bit. And now it's going to snap to the 0 crossing. And if this is 0, whenever the audio waveform is above the 0 line, it tells the speaker to move out. And when it's below, it tells the speaker to move backwards. So imagine that we're going into a loop where by the end of the loop, we're telling the speaker to go fully out. Let's try to find a loud waveform, right? So here, right? If I try if I try to set my loop out point here, it means that my speaker is going to be fully out on one channel and a little bit in on the other channel. If it then loops to another point that tells it to be at a different place than this, our speaker is going to be stressed because it can't move from one position to a different position in 0 time or in one sample. And that's why we aim to get these 0 crossings, because if the speaker is at 0 at the end of the loop and at the beginning of the loop, then we're not telling it to do something which is physically very hard to do. Another nice thing here is that we can crossfade between the loop in and loop out point. And it's important that your loop brace is not at the beginning, because you can't fade beyond the beginning. You can't fade into the past. Sorry. Only if you're Marty McFly. Okay, so let's try to listen to this loop now. Let's try to extend it a little bit. Okay, I like that. Cool. So far, so good. Now I need to make sure that when I press the C key on my keyboard, I'm also getting the corresponding note C. So what do we use to do that? We use a tuner. So I do Command F, I go into search mode, I write tuner, I press enter to go into the results, and I press enter again, and I get my tuner. Okay, so I'm pressing the C key now on my computer keyboard here, but what I'm actually getting of tone is C, D, E, flat. So D sharp, but it's a little bit, it's like a sharp D flat. So it's somewhere in between these two keys, which might be good if this was the only harmonic piece in my composition. But chances are I'm going to mix this with something else that I need to play. And if I have two different tunings, it takes up a lot of brain power to match those tunings. So what I'll do instead is I'll just take my instrument and I'll tune it so that when I'm actually pressing the C key, I'm not getting something in between here, I'm getting a C. I hope we can agree on the niceness of that. So tuner says E flat, also a little bit of A flat, interesting. This is an imperfect recording, so there's going to be some noise. Side note, if the tuner is not showing you the correct pitch, it's not showing you a pitch at all, it's because there's too much information. There's noise, all right? There might be too many overtones. And if there's too many overtones, so we can't distinguish like some kind of harmonic anchor, then we can't really say that it has a pitch. Some might say everything has a pitch, but bear with me here. So the other tool we can use here is a little bit more advanced. It's very cool, and it's called the spectrum. So I search for spectrum, and it's going to show me all of the harmonic content of this sound. And whenever you see this arrow on a device, you need to click it. Click it, always. It's free stuff and surprises. So first thing I do after loading up the spectrum is I press the arrow, and lo and behold, I get a massive version of the spectrum. And if I take the browser in, like this, I can play and I can see everything that's in my sound. I can see all the noise and the low end. We're going to get to that. I can see the lowest fundamental, which is the root note. I can see the first harmonic, second harmonic, and so forth. And I'm going to let go of the key now, and it's going to keep a snapshot of the waveform here. And if I hover my mouse over this peak, I can see that it's about 81 Hertz, and that corresponds to E in octave 1 according to Ableton Live. But I don't know if it's an E flat or E sharp, but it's just like closest to an E. Then this peak here is an A sharp, and funnily enough, my tuner showed E flat, and I think, let's see, okay, A flat. So somewhere close. And we could look at the further harmonics. Here's another A sharp, sorry, another A sharp, a C sharp, and so forth. It gets harder whenever we move up because it's logarithmic, so we like the distance becomes really small. So usually we aim for the lowest fundamental. All right, so E, but I'm playing a C. I can go into pitch and osc, and here I can transpose down. So playing C, getting an E, transpose down one semitone. Getting a D, closer, C sharp, C. Excellent. But it's still a little bit sharp, so I'm going to use the detune, which is in sense. And I'm just going to get close here. I can't make it perfect because the recording is not perfect, but this is good enough. Now I'm going to try to play G. Great. F. All right, I got my instrument tuned. Excellent. Now I can double click the waveform, put my spectrum away. I can delete my tuner and my spectrum because I don't need these anymore. I assume that it's tuned and I can move on. All right, so now I need to turn this into more of a playable instrument. There was one thing that's really nice about the sampler, and you can change the pitch in different ways. I did it in here. Another way, which would be smarter. Let's see. I'm gonna redo that. All right, so I can see that the lowest harmonic here, the fundamental, is an E, and the tuner says that it's a sharp E flat. So if I go into sample, I can change the root key here to E. And what it's doing now is, or D sharp it says here, and then I can detune it down. All right, So this is specific for the sampler in live, that we can change the root key down here. In other samplers, what you'll see is a transpose and a detune, but essentially they're the same. It's just a different way of putting in the root key directly. I'm gonna get rid of the tuner and the spectrum again, and now I want to start designing the sound of my instrument. And I have a couple of different things that I can use in here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to group my instrument, which means it goes into a box. And this box has 8 different knobs that I can turn. Just as this keyboard has 8 different knobs that I can turn. Imagine now that I've made this with my singing bowl sample inside of it, and now I need to choose what these 8 different knobs are gonna change in the instrument. One could be volume, one could be filter, one could be distortion, one could be space, and so forth. But it's up to me to choose what it's gonna change. And the first thing I like to change is the filter frequency, because it has a big effect. Right, I can make my sound go more in the back by taking out the high frequencies. I can make it come to the front by letting the high frequencies through. So this is a low pass filter, and I have a frequency and I have the resonance. And what I do in order to choose what is important enough to become a macro is that I play with it. It's very obvious that this has an impact. All right. So once I've chosen my parameter, filter frequency, I'm going to right click and say map to macro 1. And now it says filter frequency. It's also set it to the lowest value, so I can turn it up. And then I can give it a color, and I like to have my filters yellow. I can rename it and call it filter hertz. I also want to be able to emphasize the cutoff point. And that's what we do with the resonance, or what we could call Q. They're called different things in different synthesizers, but they're the same. My filter resonance, I want to have a little bit darker shade of yellow, so like this. And now I can play with these two. Here how I can emphasize where the cutoff point is with the resonance. All right, I like that. Starting to become something. So the next thing I want is I want to be able to choose how my sound is going to introduce itself, how it's going to come in. That's the attack. So I can map the attack to macro 3, and I want the release as well. How is the sound going to excuse itself and get away, get out? So I map this to macro 4. And VE attack here means volume envelope. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, so I'm just going to write attack. I know it's for volume. And here I'm going to write release. Attack is incoming, that's green. Release, outgoing, that's red. Okay? You choose your own naming, you choose your own colors. This is just a way to help me work faster with instruments I've created in the past. Okay? So now I can make this into like a sneaky pad that sneaks in. Even with a longer release, how about that? Sorry, longer attack and a long release. I could also have a short attack and a long release, and it's going to be more plucked. So give it a longer release. Almost sounds a bit like a hang drum here, with a good deal of noise. Let's take a bit of the noise out. Let's make the filter a little bit more gentle on the slope. All right, cool. I like that. So next thing I want to do is I want to be able to put my sound into a space. All sounds should have a space. This is recorded in a specific space, but I want to be able to send this into outer space, because why not? So I'm going to search again, Command F. I'm going to search for reverb, press enter, which lets me go and select the different presets that are here. I'm just going to take the reverb because I'm practicing fiddling with the parameters of the reverb. You should too. And an important thing here is that right now the reverb is outside of the box, which means that I cannot map. You see, there is no option to say map to macro, whatever, right? So I need to take the reverb inside of the box. So now we've extended my instrument here to also have a reverb on it. And then I'm going to make one of these knobs control the reverb. Think about it as like a guitar pedal. And the way it works here is that MIDI comes in here on the bubbles, you see, goes into the instrument, is turned into audio by playing this audio file, and then it's sent out of the instrument into the reverb unit. Yes? So here I want a fairly large space, and I'm gonna send all audio through for now and just see how that sounds as is. So I'm gonna up the decay time, which means the tail of the reverb. Let's try to listen to it. Not too bad. And then I want to map the dry wet to macro 6. And here, check it out, it says dry wet now. What's that? Dry wet for my flanger, for my filter, for my compressor, like, I don't know. It's for my reverb. And in this case, I'll just call it space. So it's easier for me to see how much space is here. And obviously space is blue. No space. Here how all the imperfections stand out now. And I can make it disappear totally into space by going completely wet. So what I want to do now is I want to distort. I want to set it to outer space, but I want to super distort it, like proper takeoff. And I can do that already in sampler because the filters have different overdrive algorithms we can use. So that's just different ways of adding noise to the signal or adding more harmonics to the signal with distortion. So under circuit, I'm going to choose one of these four, and it's up to you to figure out why they're called what they're called. A little bit of Googling around will help you. So OSR, and check it out. Now I can use this parameter called drive on the filter. Sounds amazing. But you probably noticed that the volume increased when I increased the drive. That usually happens because we're getting more audio signal when we overdrive. I don't want this to happen right now. I want to just get the effect of the drive and not the effect plus the volume increase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a nifty utility called utility, and I'm going to put this utility in between my instrument and my reverb, because I don't want the super loud overdrive signal to go into the reverb. Maybe we'll switch it over afterwards to hear the difference, but this is what I intuitively think that I want. So I'm going to drop it here inside of the box, inside of the group, which we call an instrument rack in correct terms. And here I have a gain knob. And what I want here is that when I turn up the drive, which I'm going to map to macro 5, and I'm going to call it drive, and I'm going to give it a nice semi-aggressive orange. When I turn this up, I want the gain here to be turned equally down. All right, I'm going to reset the parameters of both by pressing backspace on the parameter. And I'm going to map gain to driver as well. Okay. So right now, if I turn the drive up, you notice that drive here goes up, but gain also goes up. All right. So we're having a forward proportional relationship. Both parameters go positive when I go positive. That's not what I want. I want the drive to go up and the gain of the utility to go down. So reverse proportionality, all right? Remember your early high school math here, because it comes in very handy when we start messing around with data like this. So the way I do this is I press map in the instrument rack. And it's important that you open up the browser, because this is where the information is shown. And this is also why I recommend color coding and naming, because it's very easy for me to see that I have two options here for driver. I have the filter drive, which goes from 0 to 24. That's great. That's positive direction. Then I want my gain to go in the reverse direction. So the minimum value here should be 0. I press where I want to input my text, press 0, and I press enter to store the value. Don't just mouse away. It's good style to press enter and then that's stored. Friendly tip. And then the maximum value here is gonna be the negative of this, which is minus 24. All right. So when I go from minimum on the knob here, then I on one parameter move towards positive 24, but the other parameter I move towards negative 24. And check it out. They move in reverse proportional. Like they move in different directions in reverse proportional relationship, or whatever it's called. Someone who knows math, tell me. This is also where we can adjust our parameters. So say, for example, I don't want my release to go all the way up to 60 seconds, but I say that 37, that'll be 37,000 milliseconds. The 37 seconds is the maximum. Then when I go to the maximum, this is where it stays. Same with the attack. Like, maybe that's a little bit too long for the introduction of the sound. Maybe, yeah, 10 seconds is good. So I find attack and I input 10,000. And by doing this, I don't need to remember that, oh, okay, at 8:45, this parameter sounds amazing, but anything above this is crap. This is how I make performative instruments where I know that minimum value is great, maximum value is great, okay? So do yourself the favor and make your instruments and effects playable in that sense, because in half a year you're gonna forget that it was nice here, here, and here, but just like minimum, maximum, everything goes. All right. Great, it works. The volume increase is not significant. Check it out. I'm in minimum drive, maximum drive. There's a little bit like in the middle, but we can't really change that. It's because both of them are moving linearly and decibels are like not moving linearly. So Ableton Live, if Ableton, if you see this, like, please let us change the curvature of this. That would be badass. Feature request. Okay, so this is more or less it. There are different ways that you can do this. I could have also, instead of used the utility, I could have mapped the volume inside of the instrument and I could have saved the utility. And I could also have used the overdrive effect maybe after the reverb or before the reverb, instead of using the drive which is inside of the instrument. So there are many ways that you can use this, and it's up to you to go crazy creative with it and start making your own instruments. I have a lot of fun with it, and I hope you are gonna have a lot of fun with it as well. And the more you do this, the more you also get closer to, you know, the infamous your sound, because you're making decisions on what's nice for you at this moment, and then you save it. And that's the last thing we're gonna do. So we've moved from having one instrument to having a series of instruments that we can control by values we've selected and scaled and paired in whatever way we've chosen. And right now everything is called instrument rack. And it's because it's enclosed in an instrument rack here that can have multiple instruments. We're going to get to that at a later point. But for now, just know that we need to name this rack. And I can do that by saying right click, rename. And then I put in my initials first, RK for Ras Kjærbo. And then I'm going to call this distorted singing bowl Louise, because she gave me the sound. So that's a tag for me to remember this. And let's call it video, just because I'm doing the video. I already have a version of this, but maybe this could turn into something else. I'm going to press enter again because I'm done inputting. And now I can press the unified symbol for saving stuff, which is the floppy disk icon. And when I press this, it's going to put my instrument inside of the user library under presets, instruments, instrument rack. Sorry. And it's already selected the name that I gave it. That's why we christen our instruments before we save them, so we don't need to type too much. Now I'm going to press enter. Excellent. And why not just open up a clean set and say, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do. I need some inspiration. Hey, remember that thing I made? Okay, so first of all, I'm going to put RK for my initials. So I should see, well, a lot of things that's called RK already, but I'm going to see all of my things, and I'm going to press space, and it was something with Syngescode. Ah, okay. Here are like fair amount of different versions of this Syngescode that I've made. Okay, which one did I want? I want the one from the video I recorded. Ah, here we go. Enter, and as an addition to this, I could have also put in an EQ8, and I want this after my instrument, and I could have cut out some of the very low frequencies, maybe up to 50 Hertz, just to add in a little bit of pre-mixing to the instrument. Yeah, I like that. Okay, that's cool. This is a new version, and whatever I set my parameters to is what it's going to store it with. So I'm going to open up my filter, give it a little space, no drive, reasonable amount of attack and release. And I'm going to save it again, and it's choosing the same name. And when I press enter, it says, hey man or woman, you already have a device called this. Do you want to override it? And in this particular case, yes, I do. And then when I move on with this, maybe I do a lot of changes. When I'm done with doing all the changes, I'm going to go in here and maybe make a version 2. Or call it something completely different. Maybe I optimize it with an arpeggiator and it's my arpeggio singing bowl thing. Or I optimize it for low-end frequencies. And then obviously I would open up all of this and maybe cut out some of the high frequencies, cut it, boost it, whatever that would fit with what I was going for. All right? Make a lot of instruments and remember to save them and have fun. You're just going to help yourself get closer to your sound with this. Peace.